Welcome back to the ReTribalize podcast, where we talk about building the towns and the communities of the future. Today, I am responding to this article by the Meta Project, a fellow creator in this space. And it's a very insightful article on the necessity of rebuilding social structure. And if you give me a moment of your time here, I think you'll realize why the breakdown of social structure is the cause of the vast majority of problems we face in modernity. And my thesis is that the revival of small communities, of societies, of civilization itself is going to be founded on small teams of people going their own way to rebuild social structures. This is the critical point. So let's get into this article. I think I'm going to skip the first part of it that's introducing that there's a variety of problems that we face in modernity: economic, social, loneliness, atomization, communities falling apart. And he says that many would point to corrupt politicians as the problem, greedy merchants, or self-obsessed social activists. But he kind of argues that these are all a response, a effect of the breakdown of social systems. When we lack strong culture, when we lack strong familial and communal bonds, there's going to be all manner of nonsense that erupts. So let's understand what social structures are, especially the natural versus the artificial, and let's dive right into this article. So he says, social structure can be most simply understood as an effective strategy for group collaboration around the shared interest of flourishing. Right? Humans who worked collaboratively with each other were far more successful than those who didn't. And culture, society, and religion codified collective, collaborative behaviors so they could be maintained. Essentially, civilization is a result of what worked, right? What is important is that the value of social structure and how it functioned was not something that was consciously understood, nor did it really need to be. People might understand at some level that having a strong family and circle of friends and community members was important to their success, but they did so largely for immediate and obvious reasons or instinct. There are many ways in which social structure helped support a flourishing community and nation that were indirect and therefore invisible, right? Take romantic relationships, for example. In the modern world, we think of a romantic relationship as individual endeavors where a guy meets a girl, they hit it off, and slowly grow their relationship towards marriage and family. But in a healthy society with strong social structure, romantic relationships were not only the interest of the partners in each other, but also supported by friends and family around them. Families and friends, either directly or indirectly, support or oppose relationships based on the reputations of the partner and their family, ultimately facilitating good pairing and dissuading bad ones. In a modern world without healthy social structure, dating is much more of a difficult endeavor because we no longer benefit from the collective wisdom and support of the community when finding and building a relationship. This is such a good point to start with, my friends, is the fact that I've stated multiple times in this channel, good dating is a result of having a large familiar world. When you're interacting with many young women and many young men of similar age within a community setting, you have a couple things going for you. One, you have a reputation. How do people respect, let's say, that man, right? If there's a truly, good, noble man working towards his own virtue in his life, his elders are going to respect that. And furthermore, he's going to win status amongst the other people in that community. And in fact, social status is the main indicator that women use to seek a mate. And when community falls away, when familiar worlds fall away, women tend to be left meeting guys on dating apps or at the club or at the bar where his reputation means nothing. His social status doesn't come with him. And furthermore, there's little consequences for vice, for cowardice, for hookups, for promiscuity, for all these things because they're not dating in a community setting. When you're in a community setting where your families know about each other, where your friends understand you're in a relationship, and also her reputation comes with her, and your reputation as a man comes with you, there's a lot more incentive to pick a really great mate. Everyone's helping you pick a great mate because you have social cues, you have social filtering going on. And also like cheating on each other or, just being a bad person in general, these things really hurt your reputation. There's a lot of social incentive for that not to happen. Hence, good dating can only happen in a community, right? And furthermore, you're not just going on random dates with strangers. You're becoming friends and vetting many, many different women or many, many different men. You're seeing how they interact with each other. You're seeing how they interact over the long term. And because of this, you don't have to go on blind dates or random dates. The whole community is facilitating great dating and great marriage, right? So we can see that social structure is kind of this invisible thing to every culture before because they naturally had this. But we don't have it today in a world of hyper-capitalism and hyper-individualism. So the Meta project goes on here to state the problem that he sees. The obvious question is, if social structures were such a powerful positive force for human flourishing, why have they fallen apart in today's world? The simple answer is that we have been slowly trading away the long-term and invisible benefits of healthy social structure for short-term gain, largely in the form of economic prosperity and convenience. Because people did not understand the role healthy social structures played in a flourishing society, when they had the choice between staying in a town they grew up in or moving to pursue education and lucrative white-collar career, they chose the most obvious and immediate upside. This worked at first. This worked for the boomers, for instance. And this is because the older generations could stay local and continue to maintain the healthy social structure. And any of the immediate functions social structure served that were lost could be replaced with economic alternatives, right? If you didn't have your parents around to help with the child raising, you could pay a babysitter or daycare. This was like 1950s America. You could buy a house, single family income, pay for a babysitter or daycare. If you didn't know anyone in your new community, you could go to the bar or local social hangout with friends and find people with similar interests. And that's because there were still functioning social structures. There were still functioning communities that you could integrate into, right? But with the advent of the internet, and with the advent of the internet, it is easier to feel like part of a community, even if it's largely superficial or can never provide the real world benefits of a local community, right? Simply put, many of the healthy social structures have been slowly lost in pursuit of monetary success. And whatever these social structures served that were mostly acutely missed have been satisfied with inferior economic services, right? So he goes on to say a lot here, but this is an interesting point about economic services. Take hospice care, for example. It used to be the younger generations that would take care of older members in their family. But now seniors opt to live in retirement communities or pay for hospice services. And while this problem solves the problem on its face, by no longer needing the younger generation for care later in life, older generations are not reliant and therefore have less incentive to ensure their children are successful enough to take care of them, right? This idea of hospice care, if we're living in functioning towns, villages with our friends, deep bonded communities, the younger generations, the teenagers, the kids would often hang out with grandparents, right? And the grandparents would receive a lot of nourishment from hanging out with kids. The kids would receive a lot of wisdom from their elders while the parents are maintaining everything that's going on inside the community. And furthermore, there is always people born within a community who love to serve, right? My sister, for instance, she wants to be a nurse. She loves taking care of older people. And now she does that for strangers in hospitals, right? But if we were living in a community setting, she'd be naturally incentivized to take care of people she loves, people she's already bonded to. And those people would have more meaning and feeling of care being taken by her. So when you take away meaningful community, we replace it with dating apps. We replace it with hospice care. We replace it with daycare. We replace it with all of these inferior economic, projects, right? And going on to continue to read here, I think it is valuable to take time to illustrate how detrimental replacing natural social structure with economic alternatives has been, such that we both understand the necessity of rebuilding healthy social structure, and that healthy social structure is much more than just a feeling of belonging or the benefits of cooperative work. The many invisible functions of social structure are rarely appreciated, let alone understood. And if we are to be successful in rebuilding them, it is essential to understand how deeply necessary they are to building a healthy society. So, me and the Meta Project, I just found him today. We share a lot of a very similar philosophy that we need to rebuild social structures one way or another. We need to rebuild the village model of living with friends and family. We need to rebuild new types of towns, cities. We need to really get serious about social structures because everywhere they're disintegrating. For instance, I was just living in Denver, Colorado for the longest time. And Denver is a city of transplants, right? Everyone just moves there to get a job or to go to school. And you notice that, yeah, people go out and play volleyball. There's run clubs, martial arts, dance, co-working spaces. I go to all of these things. But the thing is for most of my life, I've searched deeply for tribe, for deeply bonded community. Like, where do I meet girls? Where do I meet friends? Where are people that are bonded with me, that are going the same direction with me, going for the long haul? This is so hard to find in the modern world. This is the main reason I started the ReTribalize project, right? How do we find highly aligned individuals, create teams with those individuals, and bond over a longer time horizon, building real world projects, villages with our friends? That's the goal here. And I think this is the literal solution, the fix to all of our plights, like the economic problems, the social problems, the lack of meaning we feel in the modern world. It really comes down to the breakdown of social structures. And this is far more significant than just finding belonging. This is about creating a community that actually helps human flourishing. Without it, we're screwed. So, he goes on to state some more of the problems about how hyper-individualism blinds us. And essentially, like in the mind of the hyper-individualist, all power is derived from the individual. And there's even the delusion that any modern issue can be overcome with enough willpower and determination. I call this the John Wick fallacy, the belief that an individual is just as powerful as a group as long as he is motivated enough, when in reality, this is a fantasy that allows us to accept the weakened state of the individual. I mean, this should go without saying. Like, a team is so much stronger than an individual. And in fact, for me, like a lot of the, deep personal problems and tragedies I've had to overcome in my life have come from building brotherhood around me, finding, people to go the distance with me that can support me, reflect to me who I am. And like a team is everything, right? So let's move on to his thoughts on rebuilding social structure here. And there's a link to this article down below. If you are the Meta Project, reach out to me. Let's do a collab sometime, because I think his framework for rebuilding social structure is very grounded. It's very forward thinking. You see, when a lot of people recognize the social problem we're in, they become like almost counter-revolutionaries in a sense. They adopt all these different weird ideologies, whether that's like back to nature, complete spiritual egalitarianism, or they get into the crypto decentralized space, or they get into homesteading. And these are all cool projects, but we have to think of like, how can we create projects that lead to massive social change and are actually successful in the long run, right? And there's many blind spots, there's many failed projects, there's many cults and communes and, unsuccessful startup states that we can learn from and apply the lessons in rebuilding our own tribes in our life, right? So let's see what he has to say here. Number one, planning, the common issues. Only one right solution. The first hang-up often encountered in the counterculture space is the perennial arguing of what is the correct solution to solve the problems before us. Unfortunately, this argument is mistakenly predicated on the assumption that there is only one correct solution. While there certainly might be solutions that are better than others, it will quickly become clear that the issues surrounding enacting solutions does not hinge on choosing the correct one. This is why I believe in the decentralization of many projects, many ideologies, many communities. I think many people in this counterculture space are very convicted by a certain ideology, whether it's like aristocratic revival, spiritual egalitarianism, complete decentralization of everything in crypto. It's not about choosing the correct one. It's actually about building the team. And he's going to argue, and I argue, it's about cohesive groups of people that are just setting out towards a new way. We don't have to be so provocative or antagonistic against the modern world. In fact, we need to become masters of both. And let's go deeper. So another problem he outlines here is unnecessary exclusivity. I might suffer from this, but actually he kind of, you'll see. The other problem the counterculture community often has when approaching what to build is the assumption that whatever it is must be exclusive to anyone who is not on the same level of understanding. Basically, it is believed that anyone not aware of the problem in society to the same extent and on board with the same counterculture activity is at best a liability and at worst an enemy to whatever they are trying to build. However, denying yourself of collaborators for unnecessary reasons only makes it harder to reach the critical mass necessary for change. So there's two things about exclusivity here. Number one, he's absolutely correct. When I talk about the map of archetypes that I have often talked about on the ReTribalize channel, I talk about the more spiritual types, the more maybe right-wing Promethean builder types. I talk about more of the warrior farmer archetype, right? And the thing about being a tribe entrepreneur, about being a leader in this movement to some degree, is that we don't need to be exclusive to someone who, not everyone has to think the same way as us. In fact, I really encourage you to have a diversity of excellences, a diversity of thoughts, but people generally moving directionally correct with you. I want to build a spiritual eco-village, or I personally want to build a new town that's based around a holistic academy of excellence, right? So you can find allies in many different places, and this is why it's important as a tribe entrepreneur to be multifaceted in who you can reach and not just exclude people if they don't share your radical ideology, right? And the third problem he points out here is the failure to launch. This is the main problem I see with all the dreamers out there. The final problem inherent to the never-ending discussion of what to build is that it often serves as an excuse, consciously or not, for inaction. I truly believe in one of the first principles in the ReTribalize project is organic emergence. Align with, highly aligned friends, build a team and social cohesion through doing small projects together, outline a greater vision, and just build towards it each step at a time, whether that's a business, whether that's a farm, whether that's a shared living space, right? So many people have these grand visions, but aren't doing anything in the small, real world that builds the type of tribe they want to see. So, let's go into some of his planning solutions here, right? Solve across multiple dimensions. The first thing to realize is that the rebuilding of social structure is an effort that must exist across many dimensions of society, from white collar to blue collar work across different geographic locations, and even domains such as education, religion, and medicine. In this way, there's no one correct answer of what the solution should be, as there is a need for many solutions. This is not to say there aren't solutions that are more fundamental or that are more fundamental or effective than others, but as we will talk about, it is less important to rally everyone behind one solution than it is to get people working on a solution they see value in. Again, this goes back to the ReTribalize archetypes, right? Is how can you reach blue collar and white collar people who are interested in, architecture and ecology and agriculture and community building, right? You need a variety of different people working on the project. And one of the biggest pieces of criticism that my project gets, right? We're here traveling the world with a small team, like building the relationships, building the ReTribalize app and doing these things. And everyone's like, oh, I bet those guys can't even put in a fence post. Like, how are you going to build the houses? And I'm like, wait, if we can generate massive reach on the internet, reach hundreds of thousands of people, connect tens of thousands of people through our app to help them build teams. And also I'm connected to incredible natural builders, architects, engineers, investors, people who have built and run gardens or farms. Like a lot of my best friends occupy many different archetypes. It's like, I don't necessarily need to hammer in the fence posts if I'm good at building teams and generating income to help people, to hire people and bring together people who that is their passion, right? So it's more so like leaning into your archetype and then gathering people with a diversity of skills who want to move in the same direction, right? And I think people are so they have a lot of prejudice and maybe arrogance to people who are different than them. For instance, if you're more right-wing, vitalist, Promethean builder into crypto and you're running an AI startup and agency, you might be antagonistic to maybe more of the grounded, farmer who loves his community, festivals, and facilitates workshops for kids, but you need both of them, right? So this is where he goes into the solution of being a master of both worlds, and I absolutely agree here. He says, quote, "It is a common mistake for those who find themselves breaking from the mainstream culture to see those who are still unaware of the problems over time as undeserving of respect. However, we still rely on society for many essential things, from food and shelter to medicine and employment. To cut ourselves off from society would be at worst a fatal mistake, and at best serve as a handicap." I couldn't agree more here, and this is one of the core theses or intentions of the ReTribalize project that I'm leaning into more, is being very open and inclusive and respectful to people that are still maybe in the normal society, right? We can have allies in many different places. And in fact, if you're too antagonistic towards, mainstream culture, if you go too far against the social contract, you are handicapping yourself so hard. And so many of these visionary societies do that. They're very antagonistic to the politics of today. They're antagonistic to people working normal jobs or stuck in the matrix or whatever it may be, right? And this is a huge handicap. So this gets into, I'm going to skip one of his steps here, because this gets into edgy aesthetics and the common issue of branding, right? So he says, the most egregious mistake that learn how to read mistake that people in the counterculture movement make is the adoption of edgy aesthetics. While I understand that it often stems from the desire to reclaim a sense of self-worth and to take revenge upon the mainstream system by breaking taboos, it rarely, if ever, serves any real benefit. In fact, edgy aesthetics often end up making people a pariah of mainstream society and an easy target for their ideological enemies. One thing to point out here is, for instance, there are people who base their community around race, like a new white neighborhood or a new black neighborhood or whatever. And this is fine. I don't have, politics aside on that point. The issue is if you base your entire identity on a very edgy aesthetic that's antagonistic to the social contract, you're going to face nothing but complete backlash from mainstream society. They're going to embroil you in constant legal problems, legal battles. You're not actually going to attract top talent, right? Edgy aesthetics make your movement way less powerful. And more importantly, if you wish your proposed solution to gain more momentum, you will need people with resources, whether that is money, expertise, or influence, aka attracting top talent. As I often say, attracting top talent is the first principle that you need to think from. How do you attract the best people, right? And those people do not want to risk association with groups that could jeopardize their personal success. Let me repeat that. Those people do not want to risk association with groups that could jeopardize their personal success. Adopting edgy aesthetics, especially at first, effectively dooms your efforts to never grow beyond an extremely small and niche group. I think this is very telling of what's happening in the modern world with spiritual communities, crypto communities, nationalist communities, is these edgy aesthetics. They seem cool. People rally around them. But honestly, as leaders, we need to be masters of both worlds. We need to have our foot in both worlds and create bridges, not that type of exclusion, right? And then he goes on to say intentionally exclusive jargon. This is something I'm working on. I often say things like aristocrats of the soul or, X, Y, or Z. And I think intentionally exclusive jargon might be good on YouTube for finding your core audience, the tribe entrepreneurs out there, but it's actually not good for building a movement that can, everyone wants to live in a village with their friends, right? We don't need to be so absolutely crazy about enforcing our ideology on it. We need to go in our direction and make it accessible, positive, inspiring to, the rest of the world, right? And this is where his solution, I think, is so powerful. is focus on the universal, he says. Probably one of the most important points I will make in this entire article is that what we are fundamentally striving for is universal. Family, community, and fraternity is something every human being wants because it is both inherently advantageous and meaningful. Like, this is what I'm leaning into with the ReTribalize project, especially our app, the AI matchmaker, to help you build villages with your friends, is that as like a company and as a team, we're leaning into family, community, and fraternity after reading this because they are universal. Like, who doesn't want to live in a village with their friends? Just define village, right? That could be in a city, that could be, out in the desert, like it could be entrepreneurs, it could be nomads. Just define what village is for you, right? And we all need community, fraternity, and family, right? Because these are inherently advantageous and meaningful. And this is why, like the ReTribalize project, the Meta project, like leaders like this, I really do feel like it is the cutting edge. And yes, to be grandiose and arrogant, I do think it's the cutting edge because this is the greatest problem. And this is pinpointing the exact problem that we face. It is the breakdown of family, community, and fraternity. Everything else is a symptom of this. The vast political polarization, the atomization, addiction, homelessness, like all of this is simply because we don't have strong community, family, and fraternity, right? So this is what we need to focus on, right? So this means that if you want to create a brand that is both appealing to the right people and impossible for your ideological enemies to attack, adopting the universal values of family, fraternity, and community should be the obvious best strategy. It is not only smart and appealing approach to branding, but it is also completely honest and accurate representation of what this movement is fundamentally about, right? So I absolutely agree here. I think that as each tribe entrepreneur, based off what you're doing, you can add something to that. You can make it your own, right? Like the ReTribalize project, I'm really about tribe entrepreneurship, creating founders and attracting founders and founding teams who want to go out there and build small scale real world projects and then unite into a bigger mission, right? And if you want to come join us, come join the ReTribalize app, my friends. It just launched, like ReTribalize AI. I could show you it real quick. ReTribalize AI, this is a shameless pitch, but it's free right now for the viewers of this channel. It's an AI matchmaker to connect you to the most highly aligned people in the world who want to build with you, right? And we're just in beta stage of testing, so I need people to come use this, test it, test their strategy of getting on calls, filtering the whole world, finding friends, and starting a project with them online and then in real life. I've done this in my own real life. The reason I started this app, the reason we started this whole channel and movement, or, not a movement yet, but maybe one day it will be, is simply because I've met most of my best friends through the internet, through my multiple YouTube channels. I get on calls with these people. I invite them into my online fraternal network, the Men's Academy. We build relationships, and the ones that I feel high amounts of synergy with, collaboration potential, who I think could have best friend potential, I make a habit of inviting them out to meet me in real life, whether for an event, a retreat, a festival. And right now we're traveling the world with a small team, and that small team is growing, and I'm constantly bringing in new people, making the connections, right? And I want to make this available to everyone. The reason I started ReTribalize AI with this team here is because I have the privilege of reaching hundreds of thousands of people and filtering the entire world to find my best friends. I met most of my best friends through that means, but not everyone needs to make content like that. You could just use an app, and I'm looking for the power users who want to come use this app, who believe in the power of technology to not just to divide us and atomize us, but to actually build the teams that are capable of building the social structures of the future. So a link to the app down below. And let's go on to some common issues here that the Meta project points out. Overly ambitious. My God, you should watch my videos critiquing the network state people here. I think we have a very common critique. He says, it is a common sentiment in the counterculture discussion that society is on the verge of collapse and that any solution will need to be drastic if it is to actually work. This leads to only considering solutions that are not only far too big, but far too rushed to be remotely practical. While it might sound compelling to start an entire communities from scratch, independent of corporate influences of modern society. In practice, these efforts tend to be composed of people whose only interaction up to that point has been entirely online. And while they might ideologically align, this is far from the only dimension necessary for success. This is like a lot of the network state people. There's 15,000 people in Praxis Discord server who have online relationships and ideological alignment, but do they have wolf packs? Do they have teams in real life that they have synergy with, group cohesion? There's these huge ambitious projects like Zulu, like these startup states and startup communities like Prospera, but they have very little execution, right? It's because they're trying to build it top down versus bottom up. I made a whole video about this, spiritual communes versus tech utopia, as you can watch that. And then he says the second key mistake here is the over prioritization of achievements, right? Let's understand this. The key mistake is when undertaking the effort to rebuild healthy social structure is to judge the success of the effort by the achievements. What good is the accomplishment of a project if the group who built it immediately falls apart afterwards, right? Or burns so much trust in the process that as to never work together again. Most of the people in the spiritual community who are interested in crypto, starting some kind of like spiritual center or wellness temple, this is what happens to them. They don't have enough execution and they're over prioritizing the achievement versus building the team. And he goes on to later state, and I would absolutely second this, is that the project and the achievement doesn't matter as much as the social cohesion built on the way there. Like, choose a project, right? Especially for tribe entrepreneurs, like choose a project that's attainable to you. Maybe it's starting a Renaissance fair, like in your local town. Maybe it's building a shed in your backyard, right? Maybe it's, building a business like what we're doing, and then inviting in highly aligned people and aiming at creating culture on the way there, not maximizing for profit or achievement, but building real bonds on the way there. It's tightly bonded teams that are going to change the world. It always has been. It always will be. So let's go on to the solutions. And he says practical means small, local, and long-term. I would actually disagree with local, and you'll see why, because I think local could come after a nomad era, which we're doing. But he says, while the grand solutions of independent and self-sufficient communities or decentralized network states are exciting, those undertaking these projects often completely overlook, if not outright ignore, the practicality of their goals and methods. Solutions are meaningless if they're not practical. I couldn't agree more, right? The more you rush to big solutions, the more you're setting up yourself up for failure. It's like this startup city, Zulu or Zuzalu or something, right? They got all this funding. Peter Thiel was involved. And it's such a big solution that they're trying to implement from top down. But it's like, how does any good business start, right? A great business isn't trying to solve the entire world of advertising. No, they're like, hey, we're going to help Shopify stores selling t-shirts increase their marketing by X, Y, and Z%, and they get really good at one thing. And then they go on from there and they expand their marketing, agency and potential. It's the same thing with building communities. It's like, find one project, see if you can actually form coherent, relationships, structure, hierarchy, execution, bonds and that, and then expand from there. And this is my issue a lot with a lot of the decentralized crypto believers is like, for instance, they're building infrastructure like decentralized autonomous organizations that track user engagement. And then they have leadership and hierarchy, like based off how many, good deeds you do for the community. It's a beautiful system, but it's a system, it's an artificial system trying to be imposed over a community rather than the community realizing they need that, right? And this is like the principle of organic emergence. If all of a sudden you're running into a problem of how does meritocracy evolve well, right, within your functioning community, maybe start bringing in some decentralized autonomous organization and smart contracts into that project. The issue is when we dream too big and then try to impose those systems onto something, it's just like building a business and creating all of these like software and technological resources and updating Notion and all these different things when you can't even execute one sale. It's like, start with the sale, deliver the product, get better, and then adapt systems as the project grows, right? And this goes back to group cohesion, right? He says, the essential metric of success for building social structures is not what is achieved, but the cohesion of the group itself. I think I've talked about this on every single video, but the goal for tribe entrepreneurs, right, is to literally build a bowling ball down a mountain. What I mean by that is not having a lot of quantity of people, right? In fact, the ReTribalize app, we limit your projects to a 10-man team. You don't want a ton of people in your Discord server. You want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 friends who are capable, aligned with you. They have diverse excellencies. Probably they're, intelligent, good human beings that you're friends with. And the deeper the bond, the mutual shared trust that you build through doing stuff, that's what's going to change the world, right? So, and this is what can lead to larger projects, is creating a really good founding team. And he says you need to do this through trust built through shared experience, right? So he goes on to say here, while it might be an important foundation for a group to have similar perspectives, goals, and ideologies, this is far from sufficient. When things get hard, how can you trust the other members in the group will sacrifice for you? And similarly, how can anyone know you are someone even worth sacrificing for? Relationships can't be forced, right? Like, we're traveling with this team here. We've been together for a few months now. And finally, we're getting to a point where I feel like a deep settling into friendship, right? And he says here that you need trust, and trust can only be built through shared experience, primarily experience that requires mutual sacrifice towards shared goals and each other, right? And he actually, at the end, he gives some examples of projects you can start. One is like an online fraternal network. I run the Men's Academy, which we talk about philosophy, culture, personal development, building businesses. And from there, I invite people to come meet me, to come work on the ReTribalize app with us, maybe to take a trip, together. But for you, like, you may not be at my stage of like where we're at with tribe entrepreneurship. But nonetheless, like, you can identify key people in your local community that you really resonate with, right? And set up maybe a brotherhood group that meets every Sunday to work on the shed in the backyard and drink beers. When I was living in Durango, I started a very successful brotherhood group, and we'd meet up to sauna, cold plunge, meditate, take hikes together. We would do this every week, if not twice a week, consistently for well over a year or two. And from that, we built such deep bonds, like brotherhood. I understood these men, their strengths, their weaknesses, and there's a deep sense of loyalty in that. And if you create a project from that kind of space, it's going to be 1,000 times more successful than anything else, right? So it comes down to people. And then this is the key. So we talked about not being overly exclusive and ideological at the beginning, but for founders, to build a founding team, you also need to be very exclusive. This is where you need to understand your outer network versus your inner circle, right? So prioritizing quality over quantity. When we're saying not to be radically exclusive with your language or with your connections, we're talking about your outer network. But if you want someone to travel with you long term, or maybe you're filtering people for renting a co-living house in Denver to practice community building and start a farm together, or whatever you're doing, like finding other families to go homestead with, you need to filter a lot. The more you filter, the bigger your outer network is to filter from, the higher quality people you will find. What you're looking for is best friend material, right? So he says here, much like valuing achievement over group cohesion, people often make the mistake of valuing the number of people in a group with little consideration of the quality of those people, right? And it is often, he says, it is often best to remove lower quality people or limit lower quality conversation for more productive people and conversations to arise. I've experienced this so much building an online community. If I let lower quality conversations run wild, the people who are tier one, who are A players, are going to leave. They don't have time for that. And also, they don't feel like when they put their ideas into the chat or into the call that they're really like valued and understood, because oftentimes communities will fall to the lowest common denominator. Let me repeat that. Communities, especially founding teams, will fall to the lowest common denominator. So when you're building communities, really prioritize quality and deeper bonds over quantity. And as I've often said, build a bowling ball down a mountain. 1, 2, 3, up to 10 high quality people, highly aligned on a dream. This is what builds nations. And so he gives a couple things, steps that everyone can take. And in fact, we have tons of content on becoming tribe entrepreneurs. The app is full of resources on this. So definitely come join the app, subscribe to the ReTribalize, project. And I'll say a couple things that you can do is, he says the first principle is find fraternal networks. The first place to start for anyone who is serious about becoming part of the parallel movement. And that's what we're doing. We're building parallel institutions. It's not a violent revolution, right? This is a revolution of building social structures that are so obviously superior that people are just like, yeah, obviously I would live there. I would choose that. I would choose that system, right? This is what we need to build. And the people who are interested in building this, right? You're going to find others in online fraternal networks, right? Like the Men's Academy, whatever you need to do. I would recommend just joining the ReTribalize app, right? And while it's not a sufficient solution by any means, these online communities, it is probably the strongest foundation upon which to build until you have a local fraternal network, right? So this is the next step we're taking. This is not only about discussing ideas, but there's a lot to be said for the catharsis of having a group of guys you can relate with. So find your fraternal network, right? This is where I source talent, friends from, all these things. He also says you can join local volunteer groups. I think you can join value-based communities like martial arts communities. What you need to do is start filtering the world, right? He says work parties are also one of the best things. So this kind of goes into, I have more frameworks on this, but what you need as a tribe entrepreneur is a large outer network where you're constantly filtering people. You're going to the co-working cafes, sauna, cold plunge centers, entrepreneur networking, conferences. You're meeting people. And then you're inviting people to do projects with you that you really like, whether that's just like a brotherhood meetup on a Sunday. He says work parties are great strategies, like getting together to build a business, build a shed, take a hike, build something together. I think that's a great strategy. He also says become the guy, right? And I think we all need to understand if we're more introverted or extroverted. If you are more extroverted, tribe entrepreneur, founder type, the guy is what you need to become. The guy is an archetype we have all encountered before. He is the person in the community who everyone seems to know. He's also helpful, willing to lend a hand, or connect with you when connect you with someone who is well suited to solve your problem. Essentially, the guy is equal to a tribe entrepreneur. The guy is someone who puts people first, who thinks in terms of teams, social structures, collaboration, right? Culture. He's putting that on the pedestal rather than profits, rather than individualism, rather than his own pursuits. And because of this, people, right, tend to respect him. And he's always helpful, willing to lend a hand or connect you with someone. And it's not because he's the smartest or the most capable that he holds this position as the guy, but it's through his service. And he goes on to say, as I have pointed out before, when people demonstrate responsibility through action, it is the natural response of a healthy society to give that person more power with the hope he will use that power for the further benefit of those around him. This goes back to his thesis on social structures. Leadership emerges naturally when you have a community that sees each other, that has reputation, that has actual respect for displays of public virtue, helpfulness. Like, guys, it's just like all this shit is so natural. Social structures, they are naturally emergent once you get people together, forming an identity, walking in a certain direction. When you do these things, you don't need this top-down layering of like, what's the ideal government and X, Y, or Z. My thesis is if you filter highly aligned people, build a founding team, go towards a vision and invite people who are vetted, who are helpful, who are with the project, and you go through this list and guide of the branding and X, Y, and Z, you're going to create a village, a community that is sovereign, where people want to serve the whole, where they identify with being part of a larger project. And because of this, there's natural emergence of what kind of economy should we have? What kind of crypto projects should we build? What kind of businesses into the outer world? What's our farming, architecture, ecology, infrastructure? All of these things, leaders rise to fulfill roles, and there's a natural governing system that gets imposed by the people, right? Now, I think leadership is really important, becoming someone worthy of leadership, right? But also, I really do believe in organic emergence. So he finishes with meet your mutuals. If you are reading this, you are probably online to some degree. You probably have a social media account, X, Y, or Z. If you have that, it is surprisingly easy to connect with other good people like you online. All you have to do is reach out in their DMs, offer to jump on a call, and have a conversation. So to the Meta project, let's get on a call, brother. Would love to talk to you about this. And also for everyone out there, this is how I built my global network. I'm traveling the world to meet people who are aligned with this project. And this is why we built ReTribalize.ai, right? It's literally an app that's designed to connect you to people who want to build a village with you. It filters them forward for you, facilitates calls and connections with each other. And then from there, you can build projects, right? So I think it's time to use the internet to filter the world, to find the others, to build the projects that can start the movement. This is the ReTribalize project. Links below. Go reach out. Say hi to the Meta project. Peace.